just let me know. Otherwise, I believe Michelle is correct. You just fill it in online as we go and hit submit at the end.
Which round are we in?
This is round 2.
Okay, and do we have team codes yet?
I'm going to get into that with the teams right now. So if you have any questions at all, please raise your hand or speak up.
Okay, so if I raise my hand while you're talking, you'll be able to hear me when I talk. You haven't muted me yet. Obviously, you haven't muted me at this moment, but
right, mute. You control your own mute.
okay.
I do that.
Okay.
All right.
Yes, thank you.
So I believe we're online. If we could get started, could somebody from the prosecution give us your team number and let us know you're ready, please?
I believe that our team number is 6 and we are ready, Your Honor.
And the defense team number, are you ready?
Our team number is 5 and we're ready.
All right, great. I'm going to go down this list of pretrial procedures. I know that from this morning, we did not have team rosters, but I overheard some preliminary conversation about introductions. So let's get to that in a minute. I assume that everyone is here who needs to be here and nobody is here who shouldn't be here. Photograph, video recorder information doesn't apply. No recesses will be allowed, except in the case of emergency. If there's some problem, please let me know. And I asked the scoring panelists to take a look at the names that are displayed and let me know if you think you know any of these participants so that we know if there's a potential conflict. Remember that any disputes must be reported in accordance with oh, go ahead, Anne.
I'm sorry, I don't see any names displayed.
Well, on my screen,
Are you on gallery view by chance, Ann?
Maybe that would help. Yes. Yes.
Okay. So take a look at the names. And then, of course, if any of the participants recognize Ms. Kelson or Ms. Faust, let me know. As I was saying, disputes must be reported in accordance with competition rules.
Judge.
With time requirements. Go ahead.
Judge, I recognize the name Margaret Ochoa. If it's a person my age, if it's a young
It's me.
Okay. Margaret and I worked together years ago.
What's your affiliation with the competition, Ms. Ochoa?
I am a coach.
I do not know if that poses a conflict or not. Does anybody have an opinion on that?
This is Sarah Sampson. I'm the coach for the other team. I do not have a problem with that. Murray and I have coached in the past together. So, so I think we have mutual conflicts, but I am confident that everyone can be fair in this competition. Margaret, if you're okay with that.
I am as well. The Kelsons have a long history of fairness in this competition, so I'm perfectly comfortable with it.
Great.
As am I.
Thank you very much.
And Murray, there was a comment in the chat. Mr. Zeman has said that I scored his last round, which I did, but I believe they were the prosecution. I believe they're the defense this time around. So I believe I can still score them since it's not the same side.
And I scored, well, I participated with Team 6 last round, but I believe all my evidentiary rulings were the same effect on everybody.
I have no issues with either of those potential conflicts. Margaret, are you okay with both of those scenarios?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Right, back to the introductory matters. Compliance with time requirements will be considered in scoring individual performances. Last round this morning, I granted both sides an extra 2 minutes. Technology 2 minutes just for the efforts of going back and forth to the exhibits. And so I would say I'm inclined to do that this time. To the teams, don't panic. If we have technology delays or other delays, I will be happy to grant extra time if we need it. So feel free to ask, but please don't be stressed about that. It's new to all of us. All right, so I'd like to do this first. I'd like to swear in everybody first and then do the introductions. And so team members, please raise your right hands. Do you promise that the presentation you're about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to the facts and rules of the mock trial competition? And I will take that as a lot of yeses. Witnesses, do you promise that the testimony you're about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to your witness statements, that you will not add material facts or opinions which are not contained in the case problem, and that you will follow the rules and procedures of the mock trial competition? All right. Scoring panelists, please raise your right hands. Do you promise to adjudicate the mock trial competition as fairly and objectively as possible in accordance with the facts, procedures, and rules of the mock trial competition?
Yes.
I will, Your Honor.
Thank you very much. All right, let's go back to the introductions. Prosecution, I don't know that we need to have everybody introduce themselves separately. One person could do that for everybody. I will let you choose. Prosecution, please go ahead, introduce yourselves and tell us the names, the roles you will be playing.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury. My name is Louis Stemfer, and joining me at the plaintiff's table today will be Cayman Story and Austin Yee. It is an honor for us to represent the people of Colorado, and I will be conducting the direct examination of Kyle Cusack and cross-examining Taylor Perkins. Cayman Story will be conducting the direct examination of may I, co-counsel, please introduce themselves?
That's fine. Yeah, do you have a question?
I do. Are we supposed to be putting these names into the sheet now as they introduce?
That is, I would go ahead and do that. As last time we didn't have a written roster, which would be typical. Last round also, the publication of the team roster, I was not seeing it in the chat, so we could do that or try that if you desire.
So if we want to do that, they're giving names for people that they will be that are the witness, but the witnesses are labeled as witness performance 1 and 2. So I don't know where to put the names because they're giving people's names and I'm seeing numbers.
The best suggestion I have, Anne, is to fill them out when they actually start the tournament. You'll see the student who's talking for opening statement on the plaintiff side, and then you'll be able to go to the defense side and see who's talking and then enter the name there, and then kind of go through as they go through the whole tournament. That's how I did it last time. It worked out pretty well.
All right.
So yes, you will see as they introduce themselves and they testify or elicit the testimony, you'll see who's speaking with the names. All right.
Yes.
All right, so the prosecution, do you want to have the next person introduce themselves, please?
My name is Austin Yee. I will be doing the direct examination of Alex Fuentes, the cross-examination of Professor Van Owen, and the opening statement for the people of Colorado.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury, and opposing counsel. My name is Cayman Story, and today I'll be conducting the direct examination of Detective Jordan Markowitz, the cross-examination of the defendant Avery Becker, and I will also be giving the closing arguments for the people of the state of Colorado. Your Honor, I now ask that our witnesses have permission to introduce themselves.
Yes, please.
My name is Isabella Hensley, and I am Detective Markowitz.
My name is Lauren Mansiak, and I am Alex Fuentes.
Good evening. My name is Angelina, and I am Kyle Kuzak.
Thank you very much. From the defense side, please.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury, and the opposing counsel. My name is Ming. I will be Ming Song. I will be providing the opening statement. I will also be providing the direct examination of Professor Blake Van Owen and the cross-examination for Detective Jordan Markowitz.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury, opposing counsel. My name is Tony Adams, and today I'll be performing the direct examination of Taylor Perkins and the cross-examination of Kyle Kuzak.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury, and opposing counsel. My name is Reed Benfield, and I will be doing the closing statement, direct questioning Avery Becker, and crossing Alex Fuentes. Your Honor, at this time, the defense requests that our witnesses be allowed to introduce themselves.
Yes, please.
Good evening, Your Honor, opposing counsel, and ladies and gentlemen of the jury. My name is Robert Simeon, and I will be playing Blake Van Owen.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, counsel, and members of the jury. My name is Sofia Chishlevich, and I am Taylor Perkins.
Thank
Good
you.
afternoon, Your Honor, opposing counsel and members of the jury. My name is Alex Holland, and I am Avery Becker.
Thank you. Prosecution, are there any pretrial matters to address?
Yes, Your Honor. We ask for the clock to be stopped for any internet issues that may occur during the trial.
I agree.
We also ask for our timekeepers to stop the clock when someone is pulling up an exhibit due to the technical problems that can arise during this time period.
What we did last time and what I would prefer to do, and if it's not an extended delay, just allow the time to keep going. If it's an extended delay, we'll stop. For shorter delays at the end, I'll add time for both teams.
Thank you, Your Honor. We also ask for an opportunity for redirect after cross-examination.
That will be granted as well, subject to limitation to the subject matter of redirect.
And may any unfinished time be used from closing be used as a rebuttal at the end?
Yes.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, any preliminary matters from the defense?
Yes, Your Honor. We request that all courtesies extended to opposing counsel can also be granted to us.
Of course.
We ask for permission for trial technicians to display exhibits on the screen for the purpose of entering them into evidence, or if they have already been entered into evidence for expediency's sake.
Yes, and both sides may direct that their technicians publish or present the exhibits without having to ask my permission.
Yes, Your Honor. We also ask for permission to confer with co-counsel either through the Zoom private chat or through other means of communication like text messaging. We will notify you before communicating with one another.
Prosecution, do you have any issue with that?
No, Your Honor.
All right, and I would note that if we were all in the same courtroom, communication is allowed between counsel. So in this day and age, I guess that's the way it has to work. Anything else?
Yes, Your Honor. As unpublished exhibits are initially displayed on the screen, the defense would ask that it be recognized that this is just to display the exhibit to the witness in opposing counsel and not to the jury until the exhibits have been published.
I understand and I agree.
We also ask that exhibits, once they have been entered, would be constructively published to the jury, but will just remain on screen.
Yes, that's granted as well.
Yes, that's all, Your Honor.
Thank you very much. I believe it is time for opening arguments. Prosecution, would you proceed?
Yes, Your Honor. A man who built a career for himself found a passion working with youth interested in the same career he pursued. Little would he know the festering intentions of one of his pupils. On March 6, 2020, a night like no other for Mackenzie Brackman, he encountered his pupil, suited in black. Their identity was hidden, just as their intentions were. They would soon enter Mr. Brackman's home, and just like that, an altercation broke out, leading to the unfortunate passing of the honorable man. What was the motivation? A student filling in for the sin of pride as they donned ideals of revenge and retaliation. And though not intended, such a role led to the irreversible death of Mackenzie Brackman. To say the least, it was a burglary gone bad. Today, the state of Colorado has brought to you this case. A beloved lawyer and coach, Mr. Brackman was struck down by one of his pupils. A pupil motivated by pride, wanting to retaliate and wanting revenge. This student and their actions brought about by a dangerous pride that would lead to an unfortunate altercation and the brutal murder of Mackenzie Brackman. The state of Colorado brings to you 3 witnesses today. The first is Detective Markowitz. With her expertise, she will trace the movements of Becker's cell phone with the usage of cell phone towers. And with this knowledge, you will come to the reasonable conclusion regarding the suspect's movements the day of March 6, 2020. Secondly, we will bring you Alex Fuentes, a peer and a good friend of Avery Becker. She will lay the groundwork for Becker's intentions the night of March 6, the altercations which occurred beforehand between Becker and Mr. Brackman. And not only will Becker's motivations be laid flat, but you will also gain a great sense of the person Becker is and who they claim to be. Then we bring you Kyle Kuzak. Kyle Kuzak will lay the foundation to reconstruct the crime scene and bring her conclusions regarding the striking down of Brackman to you. She will make it evident how the altercation between the suspect and Mackenzie Brackman occurred, so you can come to the most reasonable conclusion. The defense will attempt to lead you to faulty assumptions regarding the condition of Mr. Brackman and his home. Their expert witness will attempt to establish a narrative contradictory to Kyle Kuzak and Detective Markowitz's conclusions. Don't let their assumptions, raised upon the slightest probabilities, sway your reasonable opinions. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you are all reasonable people with reasonable conclusions. The defense is here to sway those conclusions and create a false narrative regarding this murder of Mr. Brackman. The state of Colorado has the burden of proof today. We will provide the necessary evidence to achieve our burden of proof and tip the scales beyond a reasonable doubt to show you, honorable members of the jury, that Avery Becker is guilty for the death of Mackenzie Brackman. Don't let Avery Becker further bolster his pride by successfully retaliating without consequence. Avery Becker, motivated by pride and wanting to revenge and wanting to retaliate, had led to the death of Mackenzie Brackman. Come to the only reasonable verdict, Avery Becker as guilty. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Opening statement from the defense.
Your Honor, before I begin, I would like to say that if I had had the opportunity to object, opposing counsel's opening statement started with a very argumentative claim that the defendant is guilty. And I ask that that be struck from the record.
Right. I believe according to the rules, that itself is argument, so that it's noted, but please continue with your opening statement.
Yes, Your Honor. May it please the court, Your Honor, members of the jury, and the opposing counsel. My name is Ming Song, and along with co-counsel Tony Adams and Reed Benfield, I am here on the behalf of the defendant, Avery Becker. Avery has been unfairly and unreasonably accused of heinous crimes. Members of the jury, this is a case of rushed investigations. When crime scene photos were lost, the investigation was rushed. When the police failed to investigate an alternate suspect, the investigation was rushed. And when detectives failed to authenticate what little amount of evidence they have, the investigation was rushed. Members of the jury, because of the prosecution's rushed investigations, what could have been justice for Coach Mackenzie Brackman has now turned into the weight of an accusation on an innocent person's back. On Friday, the 6th of March in the year of 2020, Coach Mackenzie Brackman was found dead in his house. The defendant, Avery Becker, stands here today, falsely accused of that murder. The evidence both will fail in placing Avery at the home of the victim, and it will fail in proving that Avery is guilty of any crimes. Your Honor and members of the jury, today you will hear from 3 witnesses from the defense: Professor Blake Van Owen, Taylor Perkins, and Avery Becker will all testify to Avery's innocence. The first witness of 3, Professor Blake Van Owen, will give his unbiased reasoning and expert opinion about this case. Professor Van Owen, who is a professor, a former police officer, and a private investigator, will testify to 3 main cracks in the prosecution's argument. 1, that the evidence was lost because of the prosecution's rushed investigation. 2, that there is an alternate suspect, Blair Rawlins, whom the police failed to investigate in any way as a result of their rushed investigations. And 3, that because they lack sound evidence, the prosecution's witnesses rely heavily on their own rushed conclusions. The next of 3 witnesses, Taylor Perkins, was with Avery on Friday, March 6th. Taylor Perkins will take the stand and testify that Avery was never at the scene of the crime, not that day nor any other day. And finally, as the last of 3 witnesses from the defense, you will hear from Avery Becker, a victim of a rushed investigation. Avery will take the stand to testify about the series of misunderstandings that led to these accusations. She will also testify that she was never at the scene of the crime. You will also hear from 3 witnesses from the prosecution. Be aware of their bias and understand that their work only further unveils the prosecution's rushed investigations. You will hear from the prosecution 1 jealous student, 2 careless detectives who, combined make 3 utterly incompetent witnesses. Members of the jury, remember that this is a case of a rushed investigation. Remember that the evidence, or the lack thereof, will give you reasonable doubt about the prosecution's rushed conclusions. And lastly, remember that any defendant is innocent unless proven otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Prosecution, please call your first witness.
The prosecution calls Detective Jordan Markowitz to the stand.
Witnesses, all the witnesses have been sworn in, so you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, and thank you for being here today. Can you please state your name, spelling the last for the record?
My name is Jordan Markowitz, Markowitz.
What is it that you do, Detective Markowitz?
I'm a homicide detective with the Denver Police.
How long have you held this position?
I've been a homicide detective for 7 years, but I've been in the police for 13 years.
Do you have any specialized training and expertise?
Oh, of course. I specialize in cell phones. I have a cell phone technology and forensic data recovery certificate from the American Academy of Law Enforcement.
In how many cases have you used this knowledge? Detective, we cannot hear you. Your Honor, I ask that the time be stopped considering the technical difficulties we are currently having right now.
Yes, Ms. Hensley, we cannot hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Could you repeat the question, please?
In how many cases have you used your specialized training and experience?
I downloaded the contents of hundreds of phones, and I've interpreted cell tower data in over 50 cases.
Your Honor, considering her expertise, knowledge, and skill, I now move to admit Detective Jordan Markowitz as an expert in crime scene investigation and phone forensic data recovery.
Is there any objection or voir dire?
Yes, I would like opposing counsel to lay more foundation.
Response, Your Honor.
Yes.
I believe that the detective has more than adequately acknowledged her experience, expertise, and training in the fields of expertise. I'm asking her to be entered in, considering that she has been involved in many cases and has been a detective for quite a few years.
We heard evidence or testimony of experience and training. So counsel for the defense, if you would care to inquire further about those matters. Otherwise, I believe a foundation on those two issues at least, or qualifications have been laid.
Your Honor, counsel has not laid foundation on specifically why Detective Markowitz has the expertise in certain fields.
I'm sorry, expertise in what area?
In cell phone technology and forensic data recovery.
If you would like, Your Honor, I can ask a few more questions to satisfy opposing counsel's request.
Please go ahead. With respect to cell phone technology.
Detective, could you please explain your experience when it comes to analyzing data from cell phones?
I am a detective, so I go to many cases, and on these cases, I download the contents of phones. I also access phone records from cell towers, and I have done this, like I said, on over 50 cases, and I have been a detective for 7 years. I have used this knowledge over the course of 7 years.
And do you have any specialized training in this specific field?
Yes, I do. I have the cell phone technology and forensic data recovery certificate, which is, like I said earlier, from the American Academy of Law Enforcement, which is a reputable organization.
Thank you, Detective. Your Honor, I once again move to admit Detective Jordan Markowitz as an expert in crime scene investigation and phone forensic data recovery.
Objections?
No objections, Your Honor.
Right. The witness will be admitted as an expert in the area of crime scene investigation and cell phone data and recovery. Please proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Detective, what is your relation to this case?
I was the lead detective on this case. I responded to the scene and I also collected evidence.
When did you first arrive at the scene of the homicide?
I arrived at the scene at 14:20, or for those not familiar with military time, 2:20 in the afternoon.
When you entered the house, what did you observe?
I noticed that the kitchen was in complete disarray. There was a knocked over chair, there was a missing knife, there was a broken plate. There wasn't anything immediately visible as stolen, like a lack of television where there was a space for a television. And I also noticed that the victim, obviously the victim, Mr. Brackman, was in the doorway.
And how exactly did you find the victim?
The body was face down in a pool of blood. There was a knife nearby. The back and shoulder of the victim were bloody, and there was a visible stab wound.
Detective, did you document your findings?
Yes, of course. I took photos, some of which were unfortunately corrupted, and I also collected cell phone and tower data from witnesses that helped to establish Mr. Brackman's involvement.
Detective, you mentioned that some of the photographs were corrupted. Did this impact your analysis and conclusion in any way?
Absolutely not, no. I have a very good memory. The main photos that were corrupted showed a cast-off pattern, and since I was able to see the pattern and recognize it as a cast-off pattern, as well as remember that these photos showed a cast-off pattern, it did not impede the investigation in any way.
Did you document the position in which you found the victim?
Yes, I took photographs. He was face down in the doorway.
Your Honor, may I now have permission to have a member of my co-counsel display what has been previously marked as Exhibit 2 on the screen?
Yes, and you don't need to ask my permission in the future to do that.
Of course, Your Honor. Thank you. Detective, do you recognize the image in front of, oh, sorry, my co-counsel is not quite shared that yet. Thank you. Detective, do you recognize the image that is in front of you?
Yes, I do.
What is it?
It's an image of the victim in the position that I found him.
Is it a fair and accurate representation of the way you found the victim on March 6, 2020?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, I now move to admit Exhibit 2 into evidence.
Objections?
Yes, Your Honor. Objection. This image is very unfairly prejudicial. It's quite graphic.
Response, Your Honor.
Please.
Your Honor, this is an incredibly probative because the evidence that is being presented is in Exhibit 2 is essential in determining the cause of the victim's death and therefore was vital in the detective's examination of the evidence and her conclusion in today's case.
I would agree the evidence is graphic, but it's relevant as setting forth the facts of the case, so I'll overrule the objection.
Thank you, Your Honor. Detective, what can you conclude from this photograph?
Well, I'm able to see the stab wounds in this photograph, so like you mentioned earlier, it helped me to determine the cause of death. I was able to see that the knife had been removed And I was able to determine that the victim had likely been trying to exit the residence when he passed away. And I was also able to determine the position at which the knife entered the body, entered through the shoulder and into the back. It's quite literally stabbed in the back.
At this time, I would ask that my co-counsel stop sharing their screen. Did you observe the upper level of the residence?
Yes, I did.
What did this reveal?
I realized that nothing had been stolen. There were no TVs or laptops missing throughout the residence.
And because of this, what is your conclusion of what happened with Mackenzie Brackman's residence on Friday, March 6, 2020?
In my expert opinion, there was a break-in, possibly an attempt to vandalize, and the murder was a result of this vandalism being interrupted. I believe that Avery Becker went to Mr. Brackman's house in an attempt to vandalize it and was interrupted. There was a fight that ensued, and the result of this fight was Mr. Brackman's murder.
After going to and observing the victim's property, how did you continue your investigation?
I downloaded cell phone data as well as accessed all the information from the Ring cameras present in the residence.
And did you discover anything about Mr. Brackman's life and his commitments?
Yes, I discovered that he spent a great deal of his time as a mock trial coach. In fact, a shocking amount of his correspondence was related to mock trial.
Once you discovered that Mr. Brackman was a coach for the Colorado High School mock trial team, how did you proceed?
Well, I contacted the school. I didn't initially believe that there could be a lead here, but I ended up in contact with a student called Mr. Alex Cifuentes, who revealed that a student named Becker had been kicked off the team and had in fact vandalized Mr. Brackman's Porsche. They'd also sent text messages that showed a clear intent to vandalize Brackman's home.
What information did Ms. Cifuentes reveal?
So there had been frequent conflicts between Becker and Brackman. There had been the incident of vandalizing that I mentioned earlier, where a car was vandalized, which is no small matter. And there were also those text messages that showed the clear intent to vandalize Mr. Brackman's home.
Did you ever contact Avery Becker?
I did, through the school.
And were you able to search Becker's phone?
No, they claimed to have lost their phone, but I was able to access cell tower records through their phone company.
Is there a document that presents an overview of this information and the conclusion you obtained from it?
Yes, I believe that it's Exhibit 16.
May a member of my co-counsel please display what has been previously marked as Exhibit 16 on the screen?
Yes.
Thank you. Detective, do you recognize the document that is in front of you?
Yes, I do.
What is it?
It is an overview of the call records from March 6th on Avery Becker's phone.
Is it a fair and accurate representation of the call detail records from March 6, 2020?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, at this time, I would like to offer Exhibit 16 into evidence.
Objections?
No objections, Your Honor.
Exhibit 16 is admitted.
What did these call detail records reveal?
So these records reveal that Becker's phone took a path from their house to the victim's house and arrived at the estimated time of the murder. The phone went from tower 1227-3, which covers Becker's house, to tower 1191-1, which covers Rock Creek Parkway, the path one would take to get from Becker's house to Brackman's house, and finally tower 1197-1, which is close to Brackman, who's the victim's house.
Is the path shown on this document?
Yes, I believe it is in blue.
Thank you. At this time, I would ask my co-counsel to stop sharing their screen. In your expert opinion, what happened on Friday, March 2020?
In my expert opinion, Becker went to Brackman's house with the intent to vandalize the property in retaliation for being kicked off of the mock trial team, as well as mocked throughout several years of mock trial. Brackman's Ring camera alerted him to the intruder entering the house, and he armed himself with a knife from the kitchen. Becker would take this knife in the conflict that followed and use it to kill Brackman.
And in your expert opinion, who do you believe is responsible for Mackenzie Brackman's death?
In my expert opinion, I believe that Avery Becker is responsible for Mackenzie Brackman's death.
Thank you. Your Honor, no further questions.
Thank you. Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Yes.
Detective Markowitz, you were the one who downloaded the contents of Coach Brackman's phone?
I was.
And in the phone, you found evidence that he had a Ring doorbell system?
Yes, I did discover that he had a Ring doorbell system.
Yes, and after you found out about the Ring doorbell, did you do additional research about the system?
I am already aware of how the system worked. There was no need for me to research the system.
Great. So you must know that notifications can be turned off, right?
Yes, I do know this.
And once notifications are turned off, a person is not notified of anything from the Ring bell system?
Yes, I recognize that it was a possibility notifications were turned off, but I consider it a very unlikely possibility since it is unlikely that somebody would purchase a system whose purpose is to inform someone if there is an intruder only to turn off the notifications, therefore taking away the system's only purpose.
So you assumed that Mr. Brackman had notifications on?
I used my my experience to determine that.
Counsel?
We lost Ms. Hensley there for a minute. Would you repeat your answer? Ms. Hensley, can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Can you hear me?
Yes, we did not hear your answer to that last question.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Oh, yes. So you assumed that Coach Brackman had notifications on, excuse me.
That is the assumption I made, but it is an assumption that I made based on my years of experience and the balance of probability.
Thank you. So when you interviewed Alex Cifuentes, Alex didn't have their phone with them, is that correct?
No, they told me that they had left their phone at home since it was charging. I found this a little bit surprising, but not unrealistic. It is normal for people to behave in a slightly different way than normal when they're stressed out, and being interviewed by police is definitely a stressful experience.
And so you never saw Alex's phone in person?
No, I did not see their phone, but they were able to send me text messages. So I was able to completely understand the content of the screenshots that they testified to.
In your affidavit, you described Alex Cifuentes as your biggest breakthrough in the case. Is that correct?
Yes, they were.
Counsel?
Another interruption there, Ms. Hensley. Are you with us? Ms. Hensley?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Let's redo the question and answer then, please.
Thank you.
Yes, so Detective Markowitz, you described Alex Cifuentes as your biggest breakthrough in the case. Is that correct?
Yes, they provided a lot of information about conflicts between Brackman and Becker, very significant conflicts that even led to vandalism, a criminal offense.
So after you interviewed Alex, you had them send you screenshots of their alleged conversation with the defendant. Is that correct?
Yes, these text messages showed Becker's intent to vandalize.
Right. And you never saw that conversation in person?
I did not see the cell phone, but again, I got these screenshots which showed all of the content.
You never investigated the authenticity of the screenshots?
I did not think it necessary. I had the content of the screenshots.
You did not think it was necessary to investigate?
I can't hear you. I'm sorry. Could you repeat your question? I still cannot hear you.
Sorry, am I back now?
Yes, I heard that.
Okay, so when did I?
Just repeat your question, please.
Oh, yes. And so Detective Markowitz, you did not find it necessary to investigate the authenticity of the biggest breakthrough in your case?
The biggest breakthrough in my case was all of the information I got from Alex Fuentes, not specifically a set of screenshots. But I did not find it necessary to further investigate the screenshots, no.
Thank you, Detective Markowitz. And do you know what happened to the blood splatter photos?
They were unfortunately corrupted, which happens sometimes, and it's very unfortunate. But like I said, it did not impede my investigation in any way, as I have a very good memory and was able to recognize the blood splatter as a cast-off pattern.
Are you capable of copying photographs?
I don't really know what you mean.
Sorry, I'm going to repeat my question, rephrase my question. Is the police department capable of copying photographs?
Objection, relevance, Your Honor.
Response?
This is relevant because it goes to that the prosecution did not bother to copy photos when they had the ability to do so.
I think the question, excuse me, goes to the evidence, why the evidence might have been lost and what it was. So I'll overrule the objection.
Of course, Your Honor.
Could you repeat your question, please?
Yes, so is the police department capable of copying photographs?
That's not in my affidavit, but I could extrapolate if you'd like.
Are you?
I did not hear that. Could you repeat that?
Sorry. Are you capable of doing so?
So this is not in my affidavit, but I would assume that the police station is capable of copying photographs. This is not my area of expertise, the copying capabilities.
And so you chose to proceed without copying the photographs?
Handling evidence, I don't believe handling evidence is my responsibility. It's unfortunate that the photos were corrupted, but it's not from any I'm sorry, I've forgotten any incompetence.
Right, so you're saying that the corruption was not a result of incompetence?
There can be technological issues sometimes, which is unfortunate, but I would not say that a technological issue is the result of incompetence.
Not ensuring that evidence is not corrupted is not incompetence?
So again, this is nowhere in my affidavit whether or not the police station can copy photos. But I would say that. Pardon?
This asks for your speculation and you're an expert with.
I would say that I do not know anything about the handling of evidence, or even whether it is legal to copy photos of evidence for certain groups. I have absolutely no knowledge on this topic.
Okay, thank you, Detective Markowitz. Do you know that Blair Rollins is seen as an alternate suspect?
I did know that, yes.
Yes, and with that knowledge, you chose not to investigate Blair Rollins?
I saw that the major conflicts between that occurred between Brackman and Becker as the cause of the motive, and yes, I saw those major conflicts as the motive, not the revenge of a high school student, Blair Rollins.
Yes, but even though you knew that someone else was seen as an alternate suspect, you chose not to investigate them.
Ms. Hensley, we can't hear you. Need you to start over on your answer.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Could you repeat your question, please?
Yes, of course. So even though you knew that Blair was seen as an alternate suspect, you chose to proceed without investigating Blair Rollins in a way?
I followed the path of the evidence. Blair was originally a suspect, but the evidence led me to Avery Becker. Avery Becker's major conflicts and already breaking laws that in a way that harmed Brackman was where the evidence took me and showed me that Avery Becker was the person who committed this murder.
But yet you didn't do any additional research on Blair Rawlings.
Objection, Your Honor, asked and answered.
Response?
I'll rephrase my question.
All right.
So, Detective Markowitz, you chose not to investigate an alternate suspect.
I did not choose not to investigate an alternate suspect. I followed the evidence to the suspects it took me to. I researched into Brackman's life and discovered the conflicts between him and only one other significant person, that person being Avery Becker.
So you did not follow the evidence that implicated Blair Rawlings and only followed the evidence that...
Objection, asked and answered.
I think counsel wasn't done with their question just yet. So start over with the question. Allow counsel to finish, please.
Of course, Your Honor.
So, Detective Markowitz, you only chose to follow the evidence that implicated Avery Becker and not the evidence that implicated Blair Rawlings.
Objection again, Your Honor, asked and answered.
I think there's a little bit different angle to that one, so I'm going to overrule the objection.
Of course, Your Honor.
I initially considered that it could be the result of a disgruntled ex-client like Blair Rawlings' father, but like I said, all of the evidence that I found did not point me in that direction, and I was not going to make up evidence or try and manipulate the evidence so that it appeared to be the fault of Blair Rawlings.
But you didn't even try to find evidence that was related to Blair Rawlings.
When I researched into Mr. Brackman's life and looked at the scene of the crime, I did not find evidence that implicated Blair Rawlings. I was not going to make up evidence to implicate an innocent high school student.
Thank you, Detective Markowitz. No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Right. Redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Detective, in your expert opinion, do you believe that the Ring video cameras would have alerted Mr. Brackman to an intruder?
Yes, absolutely. As I said earlier, the main purpose of the Ring cameras is to alert someone when there is an intruder in their residence. To turn off notifications for this camera would be essentially making the entire system useless.
And do you find it unusual that a teenager would not have their phone with them? And do you think this impeded your investigation in any way?
I do not think this impeded my investigation in any way. And although it's slightly outside the normal, I was not concerned when Alex Cifuentes did not bring their phone. It's honestly a good thing that people aren't so attached to their phones, especially high school students.
And how did Alex Fuentes give you important knowledge into a string of evidence that may help your investigation?
Alex told me about
is outside of the scope of my cross-examination.
Response, Your Honor.
Yes.
Opposing counsel attacked the detective's investigation with Cifuentes, using the words, I believe that Cifuentes was the most significant breakthrough. I am just furthering that point.
That's the way I recall it too, so I'll overrule the objection.
I will restate my question, Detective, if that is all right. And did Alex Cifuentes give you any important information that was helpful in furthering your investigation?
I could not hear you. Could you repeat your question, please?
Yes. Did Alex Cifuentes give you any further evidence or information that was helpful in furthering your investigation?
Yes, absolutely. Alex Cifuentes told me about the major conflicts between Brackman and Becker, their difficult relationship, and even vandalism. Becker had already broken the law out of revenge for Brackman before, and this was major evidence.
And in your expert opinion, who do you believe is responsible for the death of Mackenzie Brackman?
In my expert opinion, I believe that Avery Becker is responsible for the death of Mr. Brackman. Avery Becker murdered Mr. Brackman.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Defense, would you care to do any recross?
No, cross.
No. All right. Thank you very much. This witness is excused. Prosecution, would you call your next witness?
Your Honor, I'd like to call Alex Fuentes to the stand.
All right. Witness has already been sworn in. Please proceed.
All right. Good evening. Could you please state your name and spell your last for the record?
Alex Cifuentes, Sifuentes.
And what is your involvement in this case, Ms. Cifuentes?
I was on the same mock trial as Avery Becker and had Coach Brockman, and I firsthand experienced how rocky their relationship could be at times. Now I'm here to honor Mr. Brockman and bring justice to Avery.
I'm sorry to hear that you lost your coach. If it's not too hard, could you describe your relationship with Mr. Brockman?
Mr. Brockman was an amazing coach. I mean, he always wanted us to be prepared and to really do amazing with mock trial. You could just tell he was a great lawyer, and he was very passionate because of what he drove, that beautiful Porsche. He was just an amazing person and an even better coach.
And do you know of the defendant in the courtroom today?
Yes, Avery Becker.
And what is your relationship with Avery Becker like?
Avery Becker and I, we were pretty good friends. We were on the same team for mock trial. We worked together, and overall, I'd say we were very good friends. I mean, he came to me for questions, and I went to them as well.
And how did you and Avery Becker typically interact outside of mock trial?
I mean, we interacted in mock trial, but outside of, we just kind of like talked a bit, and there was one time that we had a conversation about just him getting back on the team after Mr. Brackman and him had a dispute.
Could you elaborate a bit more about Avery Becker getting back on the team?
So there was one night Avery Becker was kicked off the team, and he later then asked me to talk to coach and ask for him to get back on the team, which I did. And Mr. Brackman wasn't backing down on his decision.
And were there any instances outside of this that you interacted with Avery Becker?
There was one night at the Fry Shack after practice, the Colorado high school mockers, we went to the Fry Shack, which is just a usual place where we go after practice. And I saw Taylor and Avery there.
And what happened at the Fry Shack?
I just went up to them. Avery was really nice to me and said hi. And then I played some games on their phone because they were kind of thanking me for helping them.
And did anything transpire after this?
I don't recall, except for there was a text later on talking about breaking into Mr. Brackman's house and trashing it, which was totally out of the blue, and I didn't expect anything like that. And I advised Avery to not do that.
Your Honor, could co-counsel share their screen with what has been previously marked as Exhibit 14?
Yes.
Ms. Fuentes, do you recognize the image provided?
Yes, I do.
And is it a fair and accurate representation?
Yeah.
And to your knowledge, has it been tampered with in any manner?
No, it has not.
Your Honor, I move to admit Exhibit 14 into evidence.
Any objections?
Yes, Your Honor, I would like to object on the grounds of hearsay. These comments were not said under when the witnesses were sworn under oath.
Your Honor, permission to respond.
Yes.
Your Honor, under a hearsay objection under Rule 803, this is an admission by a party opponent, and therefore it is not hearsay.
Response to that?
I would like to bring to the fact that this was not in any comments that were used or can be used during this moment, because the text messages that were sent from Avery Becker were not under oath, and there was not any evidence that there's any exceptions at this moment.
Well, I would find that it may not be hearsay as a admission by a party opponent, but even if it was hearsay, potential exceptions such as present sense impression and excited utterance may apply. So I'm going to overrule the objection.
All right, thank you, Your Honor.
Will be admitted.
All right, moving on. Could you talk a bit about these text messages between you and Avery Becker?
Yeah, so I think it was the night of March 6, 2020. Avery texted me and just said something really concerning and out of the blue, that he was going to break into Mr. Brackman's house and trash it. I was very opposed to the idea, and I told him not to do it, and I guess it didn't work out.
And did you take any action the night of March 6, 2020?
Yeah, like I said, I was texting them not to do it, and just trying to persuade them not to actually go through with the idea.
All right, Your Honor, may co-counsel stop sharing their screen with the exhibit? And moving on, is there anyone else in the courtroom you know today?
There's Taylor Perkins, yes.
And what is your relationship with Taylor Perkins?
Taylor and I were acquaintances. I wouldn't say we were as close as Avery and I kind of thing, but I knew them from mock trial mainly.
And did you ever interact with Taylor Perkins outside of mock trial?
Not too often. I know at the Fry Shock we talked a lot and we were playing games on Avery's phone.
And lastly, could you describe your relationship with Blair Rowlands?
Blair Rowlands, I kind of knew them, but I just heard about the case that their parents went through.
All right, thank you, Ms. Fuentes. No further questions.
Thank you. Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Hello, Ms. Fuentes. Would it be all right if I asked you a few questions?
Yeah, go ahead.
You currently attend Colorado High School.
Yes, I'm a senior there this year.
You are a part of the mock trial team at CHS.
Yeah, it was one of my favorite things to do after school, and I love mock trial.
You joined mock trial because Avery Becker asked you to.
I think I encouraged him as well to join. I don't know if I was fully persuaded to join just because of him.
So you're saying that you joined mock trial off of your own intentions?
I'd say so, yes.
I would like to direct you to line 7 of your affidavit. It's if you would follow along with me, it says, Avery was the one who told me about mock trial when I was a freshman and convinced me to try it out. So, is this accurate?
Yes, I mean, Avery did help my decision.
Right, thank you. You are friends with Avery Becker.
Yes, I was.
You regularly hang out with Avery at the Fry Shack.
I mean, after our competitions and practices, I would always hang out with Avery because we were really good friends.
On the night of March 5th, you were at the Fry Shack and played on Miss Becker's phone.
Yeah, Avery was watching over me, and it was a reward for helping out and talking to Mr. Brackman. So I was playing some games with Taylor Perkins, and Avery was there too.
After that night, Avery's phone went missing.
I heard about that, but I wasn't for sure at the time.
You take your role on mock trial very seriously.
Yeah, I love it, so I really want to be good at it.
Avery never seemed to try very hard in mock trial.
Avery had a different talent. I wouldn't say it was my way to go about it, but I did work very hard on my stuff.
This bothered you.
I mean, at times, but I think that we can all grow and learn from others, and I definitely learned from Avery and saw that they were doing great. It did bother me.
We lost the witness about halfway through the answer. You could either start over or we'll start with the question and then the answer again.
I can restate the question, Your Honor.
Bothered you?
I will restate the question. The fact that Avery Becker never seemed to try very hard in mock trial bothered you.
I mean, I prepared so much, so I guess sometimes it was a little frustrating, but at the end of the day, I'm always happy for a teammate.
You were jealous of the roles that Avery got in mock trial.
I mean, he got some good roles that I wanted, so who wouldn't be a...
You believe that Avery did not deserve the Best Attorney Award. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sorry about that.
Okay. You believe that Avery did not deserve the Best Attorney Award.
I mean, I always tried to be prepared, and Avery kind of came in and it threw the team off a little bit, so it was a little frustrating, but I was definitely happy overall. It just depended on the team putting us in jeopardy.
Objection, Your Honor, non-responsive. I would like to get a response for this question based on my original question.
Right, ask the question again, and I'll ask the witness to consider that.
You believe that Avery Becker didn't deserve the Best Attorney Award.
Try the question one more time.
Yeah, I would go once again. You believe that Avery didn't deserve the Best Attorney Award.
He put our team in jeopardy, so sometimes no.
Thank you. You consider yourself and Becker friends, though?
Yes, I do.
You submitted screenshots to Detective Markowitz.
I did.
These screenshots came from the detective, Becker.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? I don't understand the question.
The text messages that were a part of the screenshot came from the defendant, Becker.
Yes, they did.
These screenshots were never shown to Detective Markowitz in person.
No, because I forgot my phone. It was charging. You know, old phones have bad batteries, so we were in a rush, and I couldn't get it in person, and I never asked for it afterwards.
You no longer have the phone that these text messages were sent on.
No, I do not. I sent that out and traded my phone.
You got rid of the phone knowing that Avery Becker was going to trial.
I wouldn't say that. I just needed a new phone.
You no longer have access to the messages between you and Avery.
No, but I do have the screenshot still, and so does Detective Markowitz.
Thank you, Your Honor. There are no further questions at this time.
Right, is there any redirect?
Brief redirect, Your Honor. Ms. Fuentes, could you once more reiterate your relationship with Avery Becker?
Avery Becker and I were pretty good friends, and we worked well together. If they didn't trust me. I don't know why they wouldn't ask me to talk to Mr. Brackman that one time they got kicked off the team, but we were very good friends.
And what happened the night that you were pulled in for questioning by the police?
That night, it had been a long day and I was charging my phone because I knew I had to take it down, but I was in such a rush and my phone was upstairs that my parents and I had to go and I forgot it.
All right, thank you, Ms. Fuentes. No further questions.
Any recross based on that?
No, Your Honor.
All right. This witness is excused. Prosecution, do you have another witness?
Yes, Your Honor. May I call Ms. Cusack to the stand?
Yes, please proceed.
Ms. Cusack, please state your first and last name and spell the last for the record.
Certainly, my name is Kyle Kuzak, last spelled K-U-Z-A-K.
And Ms. Cusack, please tell the jury what you do for a living.
I am a crime scene reconstruction investigator, and I've been working in this field for 19 years now.
And how are you involved in this case?
In this case, I was pulled as a crime scene reconstruction investigator to reconstruct the crime scene of Brackman, of the coach Brackman.
Your Honor, I would like to move forward and admit Ms. Cusack as an expert in crime scene reconstruction investigation.
Any objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
Right, the witness will be admitted as an expert in crime scene investigation. What was the other topic?
And crime scene reconstruction.
Right. She will be admitted in both of those areas.
Ms. Cusack, may you explain how you conduct your investigations and reconstructions?
Certainly. I use a highly esteemed and effective manner that is a simple 5-step process. I use reconstruction and documentation, collection of evidence, and then I evaluate the evidence. Then I use hypothesis and testing, and then I reconstruct that all together to form my conclusions. For short, I call this 5-step process literature.
And how did you use your literature process in this case?
Well, in this case, I simply started by starting at the top of where I could find evidence to collect to imitate how the intruder would have walked into such a situation. So for here, I started with the ring videos and the approaching of the intruder.
And from this ring video, what unfolded after the perpetrator got a notification?
So within the ring videos, the security system itself would have notified Brackman that an intruder was approaching the household, which then would allow Brackman the time to prepare and find it necessary to get some form of self-defense, which is where we see the missing knife from and where we find the knife in the crime scene. And secondly, within the ring videos, we see that the perpetrator themselves was prepared.
And then what occurred after the ring video?
Well, during the ring videos, the perpetrator had moved around in the house in such a way that showed knowledge of the habitudes of Brackman and also his premises, which entails it might be someone that he knows. And on top of that, Brackman had gotten the knife. And so there was a confrontation near the back door in the kitchen where the intruder had entered, which is where we go into the struggle.
And then what occurred?
In the struggle, we find that the way that I was able to determine that there was a struggle is that there was multiple items within the household that were broken or damaged or misplaced in some way, which we have photos of in our investigation.
And what did you find once you entered the crime scene?
When I entered the crime scene, I found these items, which we have photos of, and which we use as a regular business practice to take these photos as collection of evidence.
And do you usually photos of the crime scene in your investigations?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I share my screen to present what was previously marked with Exhibit 8, 9, and 18, and please note that this is not admitted into evidence.
Yes.
Do you recognize these, Ms. Cusack?
Yes, these are the photos and the items that I was mentioning before.
And what are they?
The first one is the knife block, which shows a missing knife. The second one is a broken plate that we found near the kitchen. And the last one should be a skid mark that was also found near the kitchen.
Are they fair and accurate representations of the photos you took?
Yes.
And have they been tampered with in any way?
No.
Your Honor, may exhibits previously marked as 8, 9, and 18 be entered into evidence at this moment?
Is there an objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
All right, 8, 9, and 18 are admitted.
Now, using these photos, we find that there was disarray within the kitchen, which indicates that there was a struggle between Brackman and the intruder. And we also find that Brackman had pulled the knife from his knife block when he had gotten the notification from the ring video that an intruder was approaching. This all entails that there was a struggle in the kitchen between Brackman and the intruder.
And how did you use these photos in your conclusion?
I used these photos to draw this conclusion because the skid mark would have been created while they were fighting with each other. The knife was used as self-defense, and finally the plate was broken as they were scuffling along through the kitchen. During this struggle, though, that is when Brackman had died as well.
And you mentioned a struggle. What happened during the struggle?
During the struggle, Brackman and the intruder were grappling for the knife, and that is when the intruder had gotten a hold of the knife and was able to stab Brackman bear hug style in the back, which is the wound infliction that led to his eventual death.
And what happened following the stabbing in the house?
After the stabbing had occurred, the intruder left the premises through the front door, and Brackman walked towards the front door and pulled the knife out, which is what caused him to bleed out to death.
And what conclusion did you draw from this?
The conclusions that I drew from this in my crime scene reconstruction is that the intruder most likely knew Brackman in some way because they had preparation in his habitudes and knowledge of the premises. And secondly, that there was a struggle between Brackman and the intruder, indicating that it was unplanned for Brackman to be there.
And in your expert opinion, what is your final opinion about this crime?
Due to the fact that I know that it was an unplanned confrontation between Brackman and the intruder, and also the intruder knew Brackman. My final conclusion is that it's most likely Avery Becker as the perpetrator in this case.
Thank you, Ms. Cusack. At this moment, Your Honor, no further questions.
Right, cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Good evening, Ms. Cusack.
Good evening.
You believe that the victim was alerted of an intruder via the Ring doorbell app, correct?
Yes, that's how the Ring app works.
But notifications can be turned on or can be turned off on the Ring app, correct?
That's a possibility.
And you didn't investigate whether they were turned on or not?
Well, see, it's not just the Ring video that led me to this conclusion. It was the fact that there was also evidence of a struggle within the premises. And so because there was a struggle in the premises, that indicates that the Ring video notification had to have been turned on.
Speaking of the struggle, you use exhibits 9 of the broken plate and 18 of the scuff marks to indicate a struggle, correct?
Yes.
And in exhibit 9, the picture of the broken plate, is it true that that plate could have been broken as Mr. Brackman was leaving after he had been stabbed, not necessarily from a struggle?
If you look at the plate alone.
And in addition to that, it isn't possible to carbon date scuff marks, is it?
It's not, but it's a collection of evidence.
But once again, that means you have no way of knowing if those scuff marks were from the struggle or if they were there from long before the intruder ever entered Mr. Brackman's home.
Looking at the scuff mark, the plate, or the Ring video alone isn't going to lead to much of a conclusion. And that's why you look at all of the evidence to form your bigger picture. So yes, from the scuff mark alone, I cannot tell you the date or what happened because it's just a scuff mark.
And you also believe that the victim was stabbed with his own knife, is that correct?
I believe the victim was stabbed with the knife he pulled for self-defense, yes.
And that was a Chicago cutlery chef's knife?
Yes.
However, the knives in Mackenzie Brackman's knife block were of the more expensive J.A. Henkel's knife set, correct?
Yes, I mean, people have different knives sometimes.
Of course, but did you have any evidence to the idea that these were the the same?
I'm
from the
sorry,
same
you
block,
broke out
other
quite a
than one
lot during that
elementary?
question. Can you repeat it?
Do you have any evidence to suggest that this knife from the same knife block?
I have the evidence of the other instances occurring at the same time. So again, each of these instances alone don't make much sense, but combined, they make it more than coincidence, and that becomes my evidence.
Let's move on, or let's move back to the Ring doorbell videos. You found that the perpetrator was of a similar height and build to Avery Becker's.
I found, yes, but more importantly, I found that they appeared to be prepared with the all black clothing and knowledge of the premises.
And you can't make out the gender of this intruder, can you?
No.
And you can't make out their ethnicity?
No.
Well, that's the height and build of half the high school population in Colorado, isn't it?
Right, which is why I don't only use the height and build to formulate my
Also
conclusion.
have no DNA evidence linking Avery Becker to the crime scene, is that correct?
I'm sorry, repeat that?
Of course. You also have no DNA evidence linking Avery Becker to the crime scene?
It's actually quite common to not have DNA evidence.
And you saw photos of cast-off blood in your investigation, correct?
Yes.
And you used these photos?
I use these photos for my own personal conclusions, yes.
The jury didn't get to see these photos.
Unfortunately, they can't. They were corrupted, but it was determined that these mostly just showed the way that Brackman was walking. And we do have plenty sufficient evidence to still prove that it was Avery Becker. And there was a struggle.
Once again, you determined that. The jury did not get to determine their relevance.
Right, and I'm the expert.
And finally, you would have preferred more physical evidence at the crime scene, correct?
I mean, I would always prefer more evidence. Then I could be... More evidence is never a bad thing. So I will always wish for more evidence.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Right, is there any redirect?
A brief one, Your Honor.
All right, and I'll note that based on technological delays, I think the prosecution should get an extra minute. The defense side, if you have recross, a couple of minutes. I think most of those delays occurred on the redirect side or the defense side. Go ahead, use your time wisely.
Ms. Cusack, when were these images corrupted during your investigation?
They were corrupted after we had reviewed them as a police department and come to our conclusions. So it was after all of the experts were able to view and analyze the images.
And going back to the evidence, is it always necessary to have DNA evidence at a crime scene?
No. In fact, it's very common for there to not be DNA evidence. And in cases where there isn't, you have to be able to draw conclusions from that to begin with. I mean, the reason why I have a job is there isn't always forensic evidence that can be 100%. You need someone to look at the circumstantial to make a decision as to what it means.
Thank you, Ms. Cusack. No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, any recross?
No, Your Honor.
Very well. Does the prosecution have any other witnesses?
No, Your Honor.
All right, is the defense prepared to start their case?
Yes.
Call your first witness, please. Ms. Song, I did not hear you. Please repeat. Ms. Song, able to hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right, please start over.
Oh, yes, thank you. Professor Blake Van Owen, what is your occupation?
When backing up a little bit, please introduce your witness again.
Oh, yes. The defense calls Professor Blake Van Owen to the stand. May I proceed, Your Honor?
Please proceed.
Of course. Professor Blake Van Owen, what is your occupation?
I am a private investigator.
Yes, and do you do anything else?
Yes, I am also a professor.
What what qualifications have led you to be able to become a professor?
I have a master's degree in criminal justice.
Professor Blake Van Owen, what fields do you usually use in your investigations?
So as a private investigator, I specialize in police practices, use of force, false arrest, and forensic evidence techniques. I also testify about crime scene reconstruction, cell tower analysis, and general police investigation tactics.
Have you ever testified in court before?
Technological difficulties, I believe. Let's start over with the question, which I believe was, have you ever testified in court?
Should I repeat my question, Your Honor?
Yes, please.
Professor Blake Van Owen, have you ever testified in court as an expert witness before?
Yes, I have. I've consulted on more than 100 cases. I've been accepted as an expert in crime scene reconstruction 8 times, cell tower analysis 5 times, and in general police investigation tactics 12 times.
Have you ever been accepted as an expert witness in other states?
Yes, I've been accepted in the state courts of Colorado, Wyoming, and Nebraska as an expert witness.
At this time, Your Honor, the defense moves to enter Professor Blake Van Owen as an expert witness in police practices, use of force, false arrest, forensic evidence techniques, crime scene reconstruction, and cell tower analysis.
Any objection?
Small objection, Your Honor. The opposing counsel wishes to include forensic evidence techniques as an area of expertise, but the witness did not have any previous occupation or education in the field of study.
The objection is with respect to the expert designation in forensic evidence. Do you care to lay any further foundation on that?
Your Honor, the audio glitched out for the majority of that for me, so.
From myself?
No, for opposing counsel, the
Okay.
entire.
Sorry, Mr. Yee, would you?
I can repeat it. Yes. So on the grounds of forensic evidence techniques, I object to Professor Van Owen being admitted as an expert in forensic evidence techniques due to having not had any previous occupation or education in the field of study.
You ever that?
May I lay more foundation, Your Honor?
Yes, please.
Have you ever used forensic evidence techniques in your investigation work, Professor Blake Van Owen?
Yes, many times. That is also one of my specialties as a private investigator.
And the work that in which you use forensic evidence techniques, have you ever used that work in court before?
I don't exactly know what you mean.
Have you ever used that work in previous investigations?
Yes, I have used my expertise in forensic evidence techniques in many investigations.
Your Honor, at this time, the defense again moves to enter Professor Blake Van Owen as an expert witness.
Right, I'm going to allow the witness, based on his testimony of experience, but also education with his master's degree in criminal justice, And so the witness will be admitted as an expert in police procedure, including forensic evidence, investigation techniques, and cell phone diagnostics and evidence.
Your Honor, I'm so sorry. My internet glitched out again and I couldn't hear the beginning of what you said. Can you please?
Hopefully I can repeat it. I found that the witness does have expertise in forensic evidence based on experience and his education. So he will be admitted as an expert in police procedure, including forensic evidence and investigation, and also cell phone diagnostics as it relates to criminal investigations. Did you hear that? Anybody?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'm sorry. I don't know what's happening with my internet.
Were you able to hear what I said?
The majority of it, I believe so. Yes.
Bottom line is your witness is allowed to testify as an expert.
Thank you, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Yes, please.
So, Professor Blake Van Owen, how do you believe the police handled this case?
A rush investigation from bottom to top. They accepted the screenshots without verifying their authenticity. They lost those blood splatter photos that were corrupted. And they didn't investigate an alternate suspect, Blair Rollins.
Thank you. And on the subject of the blood splatter, do you know what happened to those photographs?
Yes, they were apparently corrupted.
Do you think it was negligent of the police department to not make copies?
Yes, any competent police department would make a copy of key evidence to make sure they have it on the day of the trial.
Thank you. And allow me to direct your attention to Exhibit 22. And at this time, co-counsel will screen share Exhibit 22.
Was that audio?
Yes, I believe so.
Did everybody hear that?
I didn't hear that. Did you hear that?
Do you want to try again?
I'll try again with it.
I'll get you back, Brackman, if it's the last thing I do.
Now, Professor Blake Van Owen, what is depicted in Exhibit 22?
Well, Exhibit 22 is an audio recording from a court proceeding that Jonathan Rollins was involved in.
And how does this exhibit relate to this case without going too far into detail?
Well, this exhibit gives a possible motive for the alternate suspect I mentioned before, Blair Rollins.
Is this a fair and accurate representation of what you have analyzed?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, the defense moves to enter Exhibit 22 into evidence. Its authenticity is stipulated.
Any objection?
No objections at this time, Your Honor.
Exhibit 22 is admitted.
Yes. So, Professor, Your Honor, can Can we publish Exhibit 22 to the jury?
Yes.
Thank you. So Professor Blake Van Owen, what do you think, how does this relate to Blair Rollins?
Well, this is an audio recording from the court proceeding where his dad was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. And Brackman defended Jonathan Rollins in this case. So therefore, a college kid would certainly have a grudge against the attorney who helped his dad get sentenced to life.
And in your expert opinion, what does the prosecution's failure to investigate Blair Rollins in any way, what does that say about the prosecution?
Well, it further illustrates that the investigation was rushed. If you don't investigate a suspect with a motive that strong, who was also absent from school on the day of the murder, then I don't know what you're thinking.
Thank you. Allow me to direct your attention to Exhibit 20. At this time, my trial technician will display Exhibit 20 on the screen. Now, Professor Blake Van Owen, what is depicted in Exhibit 20?
This is my expert report.
Did you write this report?
Yes, I did.
Is this a fair and accurate copy of what you have written?
Yes.
How does this report relate to this case?
Well, this is my opinion on the case, and it illustrates the various failings that the prosecution had, as well as my theory on how the victim was stabbed.
Thank you. Your Honor, at this time, the defense moves to enter Exhibit 20 into evidence and to constructively publish it to the jury.
Any objection?
No objections at this time, Your Honor.
Right, Exhibit 20 is admitted.
Now, Professor Blake Van Owen, what do you have to say about the knife?
Well, first off, the knife used in the murder is a completely different brand from the knives in the knife block that was at Brackman's house. And also, the knife grip that the prosecution is suggesting is completely fanciful. The intruder would have had to been bigger than Brackman to stab him in the way they suggested. But as we saw in the ring videos, he's not. So I think that the knife was held in a vertical orientation, as you can see in the picture on the report.
Thank you. Allow me to direct your attention to what's been marked as Exhibit 21. At this time, the trial technician will display Exhibit 21 on the screen. Now, Professor Blake Van Owen, did you take any photos during your investigation?
Yes.
Is this one of the photos that you took?
Yes.
And is this a fair and accurate copy of what you have of the photo which you took?
Yes, it is.
At this time, the defense moves to enter Exhibit 21 into evidence.
Objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
Right, Exhibit 21 is admitted.
Now, Professor Blake Van Owen, why do you think the prosecution's hypothesis of the knife grip is unlikely?
Well, I think prosecution's hypothesis of the knife grip is completely incorrect because the perpetrator would have had to been much bigger than Brackman to reach over his back and stab him. However, I think it's much more likely for the victim to have been sitting at the time And then the perpetrator would not have had to been much bigger than Brackman to stab him in the way that he was stabbed.
Thank you. Allow me to direct your attention to the Ring doorbell. Now, Professor Blake Van Owen, what do you have to say about the prosecution's analysis of the Ring doorbell?
Well, what is there to analyze? It's a person entering Brackman's home, but that's all we can see. They're completely covered. We can't get race, gender, or I guess we can get an approximate height and build, but there are no measurements to say exact height and build.
Thank you. And lastly, what do you have to say about Detective Jordan Markowitz's analysis of the cell towers?
Well, if he thinks that they place Avery at the scene of the crime, he's completely wrong. Cell towers are not remotely like GPS data. All we can tell from one cell tower is that the cell phone in question was somewhere within about 6 miles of the tower in a 120-degree arc relative to the tower. So the only information that we have is that Avery's phone was in a rather large area, not even Avery.
Do you believe that it was irresponsible of them to assume that Avery was with their phone?
Yes, in fact, Avery states that he was not with his phone. In fact, he was looking for his phone on the day of the murder.
Thank you. And lastly, Professor Van Owen, based on all of your analysis and investigation, do you think the prosecution handled this case well?
No, I do not. They accepted screenshots of the text messages that could easily have been doctored. They did not investigate all the possible suspects. And they neglected many things, including making copies of important evidence, such as the blood splatter photos that were corrupted.
Thank you, Professor Blake Van Owen. No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
All right, cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Professor Van Owen, you were an officer for the Aurora Police Department, correct?
Yes, I was. I worked there for 9 months.
And during your time there, you injured a young woman of color?
Yes, that is correct.
And in the following case, you reached a settlement, yes?
Yes, I would like to tell you, but I am precluded from doing so by a confidentiality agreement.
And following the settlement, you proceeded to leave the police department, correct?
Yes, I was so disgusted.
Response, the objection is relevance.
Your Honor, I believe this line of questioning is very relevant as it pertains to the reliability and credibility of the witness's testimony due to their prior motives and altercations.
The witness, the testimony is tangentially relevant to the witness's credibility, but I'll allow it and let the jury decide on the importance.
Right. Thank you, Your Honor. Would you like me to repeat the question, Professor Van Owen?
Yes, please.
Following the settlement, you left the police department, correct?
Yes, I did. I was so disgusted by the abhorrent police tactics and laws that I wanted to leave immediately.
And following that, you are currently a teacher at CU Denver, correct?
Yes.
And you haven't had previous occupations in forensic evidence techniques, correct?
No, I am a private investigator, and one of my specialties is forensic evidence techniques.
But you haven't had a specific occupation relating to the field of study, correct? As you've previously testified to being primarily a cell phone tower analyzer and cell tower analysis and crime scene reconstruction.
Aside from being a private investigator who specializes in forensic evidence techniques, no, I have no other occupation.
And since your incident, you've grown to dislike police procedure, correct?
Yes,
And that is why you solely testify as a defense expert witness?
that's part of the reason. The other reason is that the prosecution usually uses police officers that cost them nothing. Why pay a private investigator when you can get a police officer for free?
And moving on, you no longer trust law enforcement personnel, correct?
No,
Thank you, Professor Van Owen. You have been previously involved with the expert witnesses of this case, correct?
yes,
And you aren't particularly fond of Kyle Cusack, yes?
no, I generally like Cusack. You gotta admit he's a little egotistical, though.
You aren't particularly fond of Detective Markowitz either, correct?
No, not really.
So it's based off your testimony here, you're not fond of both expert witnesses in this case, correct?
That is incorrect. I said I generally like Cusack.
But you do believe that he is very egotistical, which would lead you to not be fond of his work, correct?
I guess you could say that.
Thank you. Moving on, you claim that the hold of the knife in the reconstructed situation is improper, correct?
Yes,
And in a life or death altercation, one wouldn't stop to think about how they hold a knife, yes?
you would hold it in the most comfortable way, which is the way I'm suggesting.
But considering the circumstance, if one is fighting for their life, they wouldn't think about how they hold a knife and would just grab it to defend themselves in any manner, yes?
Yes,
Objection,
and when
Honor,
you
ask
grab a knife,
Please restate the objection.
Professor Blake Van Owen, the question.
Sorry, gonna have to make you repeat that again. We didn't hear all of it.
Opposing counsel has already asked the question which they're asking now.
Motion to respond, Your Honor.
Please.
In the question prior to this, I asked one wouldn't stop to think about how they hold a knife, but in this question specifically, I'm asking one would take any grip necessary to defend themselves in a situation of stress.
I agree the question is different and it goes to relevant information as to the witness's opinion. So the objection's overruled.
Thank you, Your Honor. Would you like me to repeat the question one more time, Professor Van Owen?
yes, please.
When one is struggling for their life, they wouldn't think about the hold they have on a knife and would just grab it to defend themselves in any manner, correct?
Yes, and when you grab a knife, you normally grab it in the most comfortable position.
So the way that one holds the knife in this situation could take any form if they are struggling for their life, correct?
Yes, and I chose to.
All right. Thank you, Professor Van Owen. You've answered my question. Moving on, despite not knowing an exact location on this that are indicated on the cell phone tower records, the phone connected to a cell phone tower near Becker's home, correct?
I think you mean Brackman's home, but yes.
I do mean Avery Becker's home. It did connect to a cell phone tower near Avery Becker's home sometime in the day of March 6th, correct?
Yes.
And then the phone proceeded to move into the territory of and connect to a cell phone tower in Brackman's or near Brackman's home, correct?
Yes.
So there is clear indication of movement between the two areas as it did connect to cell phone towers in the territory of both Ms. Avery Becker and Mr. Brackman's home, correct?
Yes, I would agree with that.
And if the phone were lost, the movement of the phone is far too similar to the route that Avery Becker would have to take to get to Mr. Brackman's home from his house, correct?
I don't know what you mean.
Let me rephrase that. The movement of the phone is far too similar to the route that Avery Becker would have to take to get to Mr. Brackman's home, correct?
I don't know what you mean.
To get to Mr. Brackman's home, correct?
Yes, I would agree that the movement of the phone is very similar to the route Avery would take to get to Brackman's home.
Thank you. And you claim that this movement is the result of Blair Rowland's,
Yes.
but you also claim that this route for Blair Rowland's would be very unexpected and out of the way for them, correct?
Yes, well, when you frame someone, it's not always easy.
So it is very unlikely that this could be the cause of Blair Rowland's, considering the path that the phone would have to take to connect to these cell phone towers, correct?
If all Blair Rollins was doing was going to Brackman's house, then it would be unlikely. But if he was framing Avery, then it would be very likely because it's the most likely route Avery would take.
But there is no evidence that Blair Rowland's was at Avery Becker's home, considering that they weren't present the day of the murder, correct? Or prior to the day of the murder, correct?
I never said he was at Avery's home, so yes, that is correct.
But if Blair Rowland's were to take this route, it wouldn't have connected to a cell phone tower in Avery Becker's home's range due to not being in the area, yes?
No, as I have stated, just because a phone connects to a cell tower doesn't mean you can exactly pinpoint where it was. It could have connected to a cell tower near Avery's house.
I'm sorry, Professor Van Owen, you cut out there. Could you repeat that?
Question.
We'll wait for the professor to return. Try again.
Right. Are you there, Professor Van Owen? Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you now.
All right. So the route for Blair Rowland's to connect to Avery Becker's home, he would have to be in the territory of the cell phone tower near Avery Becker's home, correct?
Yes.
So the movement of Blair Rowland's being from Avery Becker's home to Mr. Brackman's home would be unlikely, yes?
It would be unlikely in normal circumstances.
All right, thank you, Professor Van Owen. Moving on, you stated yourself that the photos depicting the victim's blood droplets would have no weight in this case, correct?
Yes.
It wouldn't attribute to any theories of who the killer may be?
No.
So wouldn't it just be wasted time for government officials to analyze and bring them into this case, even if they were present evidence?
Well, I said they didn't have any bearing on defining who the killer was, but they definitely can help reconstruct the crime.
But the murder of Mr. Brackman wasn't in question. It is the killer who's in question, correct?
Yes. And
all right, thank you, Professor Van Owen. You've answered my question. And finally, you have no conclusive evidence to bring you to your conclusions about Alex Cifuentes and Blair Rowland's having been in a prior relationship, correct?
No.
So there is no conclusive evidence that Alex Cifuentes and Blair Rowland's were working together in your conclusion?
No, there is no conclusive evidence.
And there is also no conclusive evidence that the text messages brought to court by Alex Cifuentes were forged, yes?
Yes, but there's no conclusive evidence that they weren't either.
And if the phone was believed to be lost at the mall, correct?
Yes, that's where Avery says he had it last.
That is why Taylor Perkins and Avery Becker were searching for the phone at the mall, correct? Not that Avery Becker said they last had the phone at the mall.
When you're missing your phone, you look everywhere it could be. And apparently they thought the mall was a reasonable place for it to be, since they were on the mall at the mall on that day.
But the last known place that the cell phone was at the Fry Shack when Avery Becker, Taylor Perkins, and Alex Cifuentes were all together, yes?
Yes.
So likelihood of Blair Rowlands encountering Avery Becker's phone at the Fry Shack the day prior if the two individuals who lost the phone were searching at the mall is minuscule. Yes.
I guess so.
Thank you, Professor Van Owen. No further questions.
Redirect?
Yes, Your Honor, a brief one. May I proceed?
Yes. We've lost Ms. Song. You need to start over. Ms. Song, are you there?
Sorry, my internet cut out. Professor Blake Van Owen, can you repeat that?
We didn't hear your question, so you'll have to start over.
Okay, of course. So, Professor Blake Van Owen, what about the police department made you want to leave?
Their tactics and rules were completely out of hand. They allowed a technique that injured a woman, and I did not want to be part of that.
Yes. And what do you teach in CU Denver?
I teach a course on police practices and social justice.
What do you have to think about opposing counsel's assumption that your personal relations with the other expert witnesses will affect your work as an investigator?
It's completely wrong. I make the utmost effort to be unbiased in my investigations.
And is the knife grip which you suggested the most comfortable way in which to hold that specific type of knife?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Thank you. Any recross?
No recross at this time, Your Honor.
All right, thank you very much. This witness may be excused. Defense, do you have another witness?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Taylor Perkins to the stand. But before I begin, I'd like to request a time check. How much time does the defense have left for direct examination? Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Ms. Perkins. Please state your full name and spell your last for the jury.
Taylor Perkins, Perkins.
And how do you know the defendant Avery Becker?
Avery is my best friend, and we did mock trial together. She's actually the one who convinced me to join.
And how do you know the victim, Mackenzie Brackman?
He was our mock trial coach.
How often did you speak with Avery Becker?
Pretty often. We were really close.
And how often was mock trial practice?
At least once a week, if not more.
Was Avery Becker any good at mock trial?
She was amazing. She had a natural talent for it. She was really good on the fly, and she barely had to put any effort in, and she came out on top.
And how did Mr. Brackman react to Avery's talent?
Fairly negatively. Instead of applauding her for her ability, he always just told her that she didn't put enough effort in.
Did Avery and Mr. Brackman ever get in any sort of feuds?
They kind of had an ongoing feud. I found it kind of funny and didn't really care to get involved. There's one day that I thought really showed their feud. About a month before regionals, we had a practice, and Avery showed up the most unprepared she's ever had. And she still performed amazing, but Brackman got really mad at her, so he demoted her from the A team to the B team.
And what did you do after hearing that Avery had been demoted?
I quit the team. I was only really doing it to spend time with friends, specifically Avery, and since I wouldn't be doing that, it didn't really make sense for me to continue. And it meant a lot more to her than it did to me, so it was an easy decision for me.
So based off of your experience with both Avery Becker and Mackenzie Brackman, how would you describe the relationship between the two?
I mean, they had a tense relationship, but I wouldn't say they hated each other. They just disagreed on work ethic.
Let's move on to the night of March 5th. Were you with Avery?
Yes, I was.
And what happened? You
We played
continue.
on our phones at my house for a while, and then we got hungry, so we went to the Fry Shack, which in retrospect probably wasn't the best idea. After that, we went to the mall.
So what happened at the Fry Shack?
The whole entire mock trial team was there, as it was after mock trial practice. Everyone was telling Avery how unfair it was that Coach Brackman demoted her, even Alex DeFuentes, which it seemed almost sincere, but he was sometimes passive aggressive. So it upset Avery to the point that she stormed off and left her phone on the table, which was very unlike her because she was attached to it and it was like her third kidney. And that was the last time I saw her phone.
And what did you do the following day on March 6th?
Avery picked me up from school, as she usually did when we both had first period off. That's when we both realized that her phone was missing, so we decided to skip school since we didn't really have to go, and we retraced our steps to look for her phone. Then we went to the Fry Shack to see if the afternoon staff might have seen her phone, and that's when we saw the whole entire mock trial team, which was weird because it was during mock trial practice.
And were you with Avery the entire day?
Yes, I was.
And were you with Avery particularly during the time of Mr. Brackman's murder from 12:45 p.m. to 1:15 p.m.?
Yes, I was with her from morning to afternoon.
And where was Avery's phone located?
We never found it.
Do you know the student Alex Cifuentes?
Yes, he was on the mock trial team with us.
And did Avery know Alex?
Yes, she did as well.
Were Avery and Alex friends?
Not really. They seemed fine on the surface, but they're mainly just teammates.
And finally, describe Blair Rollins for the jury.
Blair Rollins was a student at CHS. He was a bit strange, and there's always something off about him for me.
And how was Blair connected to Mackenzie Brackman?
Brackman lost the case that sent Blair Rollins' dad to prison.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Perkins, you were on the mock trial team with Becker, correct?
Yes, I was.
But you found that you didn't try hard enough, in your opinion.
I think she tried as much as she needed to.
But compared to the other students, you found that you didn't try as much?
Yes, because she didn't need to.
And through her course through mock trial, towards the end, she was later demoted to the B team, correct?
Yes.
And this upset her.
Yes, she worked 4 years to be on the A team, and it was her senior year, so.
And you could say that this hurt her pride by chance?
A bit, yeah.
And you felt that she deserved her position on the A team more than you did, so you decided to step down, correct?
I didn't care about mock trials as much as she did, so yeah.
And moving on to one practice in particular. After practice, Miss Becker proceeded to, in an act of retaliation, mark worst attorney award on Brockman's beloved car. Is that correct?
Yes, she did.
So it was with little surprise that she was kicked off the team.
Yeah.
And then moving forward, the day of the crime, you and Becker weren't at school together, correct?
Yeah, we were looking for her phone.
And at the time of the murder of Coach Brockman, you said that you were with Avery, correct?
Yes, I was.
But did you recognize anyone when you were with Avery because you were in a public place by chance?
At the mock trial members at the Fry Shack.
But that was after the time of Brockman's death, correct?
Yes, I believe. I'm not 100% sure.
Then you later in your affidavit claimed that Blair Rollins would be a likely suspect. Isn't that true?
Yes, because I feel like he has a motive.
You even go further and say that you never guessed this to be true until Becker brought this to your attention. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
But you have no qualifications to make any claims against Rollins. Isn't that true?
Yes, I was just saying an idea that I had.
And this idea you had, you even went back to use reasoning from a Netflix TV show. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Perkins. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Would there be any redirect?
Yes, briefly, Your Honor.
Please.
Ms. Perkins, could you please elaborate on the reason why you stepped down from the mock trial team after Avery had been demoted?
I was only doing it to spend time with friends, and I didn't want to be a lawyer, so it didn't make sense for me to continue if I wasn't going to hang out with Avery.
And finally, the prosecution is suggesting that you lied about your location with Avery Becker on March 6th. How do you feel about that?
I don't know. I was with her for sure, so I don't see how that would be possible. We went to, yeah, sorry.
Thank you. That's Your Honor.
Recross?
No, Your Honor.
Very well. Defense, do you have another witness?
Yes, Your Honor, I'd like to call Avery Becker to the stand.
All right. The witness has been sworn in already. Please proceed.
Good afternoon, Ms. Becker. Would it be all right if I asked you a few questions?
Yes.
Okay. What high school did you attend this last
I went
school
to
year?
Colorado High School.
Did you participate in any extracurricular activities there?
Oh, yes. I was on the mock trial team.
How would you describe your skills in mock trial?
I thought that I was really just good on it on the fly. I had a very strict work ethic with myself.
Tell us about your relationship with Coach Brackman.
Well, we disagreed on our different work ethics. He really just didn't like how I wouldn't really come prepared, or that I would deviate from his scripts because he was very strict in how he followed his style of work.
How did he react to winning the Best Attorney Award?
Well, really, he hated the fact that I did. He said that I was lazy and that I relied on my good looks.
Tell us about the incident where you were kicked off the mock trial team.
We're going to need the witness to repeat that answer, please.
Can you hear me?
Now we can.
Please repeat your answer.
Here, can you please repeat the question?
Yeah. Tell us about the incident where you were kicked off the mock trial team.
Well, on the Tuesday night practice after the regional tournament, Mr. Brackman got up on me and said that I didn't deserve my rewards. So I went out and I made a dumb mistake. I had a dry erase marker in my hand. Later, I would find out it was a permanent marker, and I drew Worst Attorney Award on the hood of his Porsche. And then he came out and kicked me off.
How did you feel about this accident?
I was so upset with myself afterwards. I knew the mistake that I made, and I wanted to make it up to him. I wanted to apologize to him in person, and I offered to pay for the repaint and get a job over the summer to help.
Please describe your relationship with Alex Fuentes.
We were both members of the mock trial team. Really, we're not really friends. We never got along too well. You could kind of tell that he was jealous of me.
Where did you go after being kicked off the mock trial team?
Well, afterwards, I went to my mom and explained the situation to her. And after that, I tried to apologize several times to Mr. Brackman. And so then Taylor Perkins and we went to the Fry Shack to just cool off and calm down.
Did anything occur there?
Yes, there was a lot of mock trial team members there, and they were all apologizing to me about
Lost the witness again. Let's have you repeat the question and then repeat the answer. And I'd like to point out that we had a couple of delays, so I'm inclined to give you some more time if you need it. So use your time wisely, but if you're getting to the end and you need a little more time, let me know, please.
Yes, Your Honor, that would be much appreciated. I will now restate or re-ask the question. What happened at the Fry Shack?
Well, there were a lot of mock trial team members there, and they were all apologizing to me and saying how unfair the situation was. And Alex Fuentes was also there, who really just seemed really insincere about the entire thing, and it just upset me more.
Did you meet? So you met with Alex that night. How did he respond to your feelings about being kicked off the team?
Well, he was almost being sarcastic about it, like a mock sympathy. He was just acted so insincere about my loss in this. It hurts a lot.
Thank you. Did anything happen to your phone?
Well, afterwards, Taylor and I went to the mall, and at the Fry Shack, it was the last I'd seen my phone. The next day, March 6th, I woke up to find it missing. So Taylor Perkins and I spent the day to look for it.
So did you go anywhere near the residence of Mackenzie Brackman while searching for your phone?
At the time, I didn't even know where he lived. We were at the mall and the Fry Shack, the places where we suspected my phone was. And I wasn't near his house on March 5th, so there would be no reason to go near his house anyway.
Did you ever manage to locate or find your phone to this day?
No, to this day, I still don't know where it is.
Are you familiar with Blair Rollins?
I am.
How would you describe the relationship between Blair Rollins and Alex Fuentes?
I knew them both.
Speculation.
Sorry, the objection is?
Speculation, Your Honor.
What's the response?
The response, Your Honor, is that I've laid the appropriate foundation for her and for who Alex Fuentes is and her understanding of Blair Rollins.
I'll overrule the objection pending an answer by the witness that provides the knowledge or basis of her knowledge. So ask the question again, please.
Yes, Your Honor. How would you describe the relationship between Blair Rollins and Alex Fuentes?
Well, I knew them to be friends, to say the least. They hung out more than he and I did, let's just say that.
And finally, are you familiar with any times that Blair Rollins acted strangely?
He was kind of known to be the weird kid at our school. Actually, Coach Brackman was the attorney for his father, which got him sent to jail. So he definitely acted stranger after that.
All right, thank you. Your Honor, there are no further questions at this time.
Right, did you have enough time, Mr. Benfield?
Yeah, it actually ended up being perfect.
All right, cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor, but before I begin, may I ask for a brief time check? Thank you.
You may proceed.
Ms. Becker, you have previously testified that your relationship with the victim was somewhat hostile, correct?
I wouldn't say hostile, but we had our differences.
So you would agree that you disliked one another?
We had different work ethics.
Actually, you would go as far as to say that you hated each other?
I mean, in the sense that we disagreed with each other due to our work ethics, we didn't like each other on that spectrum.
It is your belief that Mr. Brackman hated you, correct?
Definitely had it out against me, let's say that.
But you believe that he hated you, correct?
Yes.
And this animosity was present throughout your 4 years on the Colorado High School mock trial team, correct?
Yes.
Mr. Brackman would irritate you by always criticizing your lack of work ethic and your underprepared nature.
He would criticize me for the work ethic he didn't understand.
He got on your nerves, did he?
Well, yes, wouldn't anyone when they were insulting you constantly?
A sense of mutual frustration, perhaps?
Yes.
And this would upset you?
Well, yes, but this is not uncommon.
So this would upset you so much so that verbal arguments between the two of you would commonly break out, correct?
Disputes, yes.
At one point, Mr. Brackman even demoted you from the prestigious A team to the B team?
Yes.
And in your opinion, the B team was full of losers?
Well, there's a reason that they're not on the A team.
And naturally, this demotion did not repair your low opinion of Mr. Brackman, did it?
I thought that it was unfair and it was spoken out of anger.
It did not facilitate friendship, correct?
Well, no, nothing that he said to me facilitated friendship.
But despite this, you were allowed back on the A team?
Yes, Taylor Perkins actually stepped down for me so that I can go back up.
And it is your assumption that this occurred because the A team would never win without your talent?
Well, when this happened, he had no choice but to put me back on there, so there wasn't any option anyway.
And as you guessed, you went on to win a reward?
Yeah, I won 2 awards that day, so I don't see what the problem is.
Mr. Brackman never did congratulate you, did he?
No, he didn't.
He actually proceeded to condemn your actions?
Yes.
He criticized you for straying off his script, correct?
Yes.
And this damaged your pride?
Well, I wouldn't really say damaged because I knew where I stood in the situation, but it definitely hurt, to say the least.
It made you angry?
Made me frustrated.
Furthermore, your accumulated rage resulted in you storming out of practice with a Sharpie in your hand, correct?
Well, yes. I mean, I was being constantly insulted.
You vandalized Mr. Brackman's car?
I admit that was a very dumb thing to do, and I believe that it would have washed right off.
And although Mr. Brackman never did press charges, vandalism is a criminal offense, correct?
Yes.
You wrote Worst Attorney Award on his Porsche?
Yes, in the sense that I believed it would wash right off.
You did this act in retaliation?
Yes.
Revenge, perhaps? Miss Becker, I cannot hear you. Miss Becker?
Here, can you hear me?
Yes, now I can. I'll repeat this. You did this act in revenge, perhaps?
I mean, it was a very complicated situation. He kept on insulting me and I wanted retaliation, so yes.
In your hate for Mr. Brackman, you attacked his car, correct?
Well, yes.
You never did like Mr. Brackman, did you?
We had our differences and I just didn't like how he treated me.
But you never did like him, did you?
Well, yes. He left a bad imprint on me.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Right. Any redirect? I'll give the defense a couple of minutes, again, based on our technological issues.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Becker, Do you have reasoning behind your actions of vandalizing the car?
Well, yes. I acknowledge that it was a very dumb decision, and I really wanted to apologize afterwards. But in the moment, he was insulting me and saying that I didn't deserve the awards that I had rightfully received.
And would you describe the relationship between yourself and Brackman as hate or something much lighter?
Something much lighter. I mean, to be fair, we had disputes and we didn't agree on certain things, but there is a fine line between a misunderstanding and a hatred and possibly murder.
Thank you, Your Honor. There are no further questions.
All right, any recross?
If I have time, Your Honor.
You have 2 minutes, and hopefully that's sufficient.
That should be, Your Honor. Ms. Becker, your relationship between Mr. Brackman consisted of frequent insults, correct?
Yes.
And you believe that Mr. Brackman hated you, correct?
Again, we had major differences and he clearly didn't like me. So what else was I supposed to think?
So you thought that he hated you, correct?
Yes.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
All right, thank you very much. Does the defense have any further witnesses?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Prosecution, are you prepared to present a closing argument?
Yes, Your Honor.
Please proceed.
Pride, revenge, retaliation. That is what occurred on March 6, 2020. A home is a haven, a safe house away from the struggles and fears of the outside world. However, for Mackenzie Brackman, this was not the case. He was severed from his sanctuary, his refuge breached, a violent act that concluded with the brutal murder of an innocent man. Desperate to defend himself, to live another day, Mr. Brackman courageously faced the alarming masked intruder, only to have his life ripped from his body. His own chef's knife, wielded by his menacing attacker, painfully plunged into his shoulder blade, pierced and slashed his skin, blood spilling onto the floor even after Mr. Brackman's life had faded away. Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury, the defense claims that Mackenzie Brackman's death was an act of revenge executed by the son of an ex-client. However, in their attempt to profile someone as a criminal, they have disregarded many of the case's facts. One of their witnesses, Blake Van Owen, who has a bias against the police officers testifying in this case, presented a theory of the case that was loosely sewn together by presumptions made without visiting the crime scene. Furthermore, Taylor Perkins, the defendant's best friend, testified to the hateful relationship between Becker and Mr. Brackman. Even Avery Becker, the defendant themselves, could not dispute the fact that years of hostile arguments had gotten under their skin. Mr. Brackman's words were an attack on Becker's amassing pride, their hastily earned glory. The undisputed truth is that Avery Becker, out of resentment, anger, and vengeance, vandalized Mackenzie Brackman's vintage Porsche. But did that quench Becker's thirst for revenge? Yes, it is true that my co-counsel and I have the burden of proof in today's case, a burden we have fulfilled beyond a reasonable doubt. Alex Cifuentes, who, like Taylor Perkins, was a close friend of Avery Becker, personally witnessed Becker's malicious desire go too far when the defendant proclaimed their intention to vandalize Mr. Brackman's home in a string of text messages. Did they go through with their threat? Well, on March 6, 2020, Detective Jordan Markowitz discovered Mackenzie Brackman drenched in his own blood, dead. Upon further examination of the house by Detective Markowitz, an expert in today's case, and an in-depth analysis of evidence by an expert in crime scene reconstruction, Kyle Kuzak, a decisive pattern of events emerged. A masked intruder with the same body and build as Avery Becker illegally entered the residence, and a struggle ensued that resulted in Mackenzie Brackman's death. Furthermore, phone records even placed Becker at the scene of the crime when the murder took place. Members of the jury, you have the heartbreaking and heavy duty of determining blame and enacting justice. So, according to jury instruction number 7, when, after considering all the evidence presented to you in this case, you determine that Avery Becker entered Mackenzie Brackman's residence unlawfully with the intention to vandalize the property, and in the course of doing so caused the wrongful death of the victim, you must find Avery Becker guilty of murder in the first degree and of second-degree burglary. Yes, it is true that my co-counsel and I represent the people of the state of Colorado, but you, members of the jury, you are the people of the state of Colorado. You alone have been given the immense responsibility, the civil duty of bringing justice to the Brackman family, to their friends, colleagues, and to Mackenzie Brackman himself. This was not an accident. It was a planned burglary gone wrong. It was an action of revenge and rage that ensued when a dangerously proud individual was knocked off their pedestal and resorted to violence. Members of the jury, my co-counsel and I ask you for justice. We ask you to return a verdict of guilty. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Defense, would you care to present a closing argument?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may.
Thank you. May it please the court. Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel, my name is Reed Benfield, representing the defendant in this case alongside my co-counsel, Ming Song and Tony Adams. Members of the jury, this case is an exceptional example of rushed investigations. When justifying the location of Miss Becker during the crime, investigations were rushed. Second, when evidence went missing, conclusions were rushed. And third, when text messages were not directly inspected, conclusions were rushed. Throughout this case, the evidence clearly and thoroughly points to the fact that Avery Becker is not guilty of charges pressed against her. The evidence used by the prosecution is incomplete and irrational, further proving Miss Becker's innocence. The evidence has shown beyond a reasonable doubt that my client, Avery Becker, was not the murderer of Mr. Brackman. In order to be convicted of murder in the first degree and second-degree burglary of a dwelling, Avery Becker must, without a doubt, have knowingly, feloniously, and unlawfully broken entrance into the house of Mr. Brackman and committed second-degree burglary, and during the furtherance of that event, the death of Mackenzie Brackman was caused by anyone. The prosecution has not properly fulfilled the requirements to convict Avery Becker of first-degree murder and second-degree burglary of a dwelling. For the duration of this trial, we have learned that Avery Becker did not commit any crime on the day of March 6, 2020, due to the testimonies of Professor Van Owen, Taylor Perkins, and Avery Becker. First, we heard from Professor Van Owen, who explained his take on the case. He described how this case had contained a multitude of rushed investigations. First, he explained this through explaining how the police lost important photographs of the crime scene. He also explains how Detective Markowitz never directly saw the text messages sent from Avery Becker to Alex Fuentes. Additionally, he brings up another possible convict of the murder, Blair Rollins, who went unidentified and uninvestigated in this case. He explains how Rollins is has the same body size and shape as Avery Becker, and it just as easily could have been Avery Becker as Blair Rollins. Next, we heard from Taylor Perkins, who justified the innocence of my client. Taylor Perkins further identified her innocence through explaining how Avery Becker was not at the scene of the crime when it occurred. Instead, they were together looking for Avery's phone. Additionally, she elucidates on how Alex Fuentes and Avery Becker were never great friends, and they always had a strained relationship between the two. Finally, she explains how Blair Rollins is a strange kid and would be the type of kid to commit a murder. Finally, Avery Becker herself took the stand and proving her own innocence. She explained how she was not at the scene of the murder when it occurred and instead was looking for her phone. She also indicates that Alex Fuentes was not friends with her at any point during their high school careers. The prosecution must, without a reasonable doubt, prove that Avery Becker killed Mr. Brackman on March 6, 2020. They have not proved that Avery is guilty of any charges pressed against her, and because Avery was not even at the scene of the crime when it occurred, nor associated with it. So due to this evidence, we ask you at the end of this trial to return a verdict in favor of Avery Becker. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Story, do you have leftover time you'd care to use?
I believe so. May I ask for how much time I have?
I'm seeing 2 minutes, it looks like.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, my computer is just glitching out. I'm so sorry. Okay. Members of the jury, the defense claims that this case was one of a rushed investigation. I can assure you that this is not the case. My co-counsel and I have presented 2 expert witnesses who have testified to the fact that Avery Becker is indeed responsible for this crime, and that the defense's other supposed suspect is in no way related to this. Alex Fuentes testified to the fact that Avery Becker sent her text messages that verified that Becker had every intent to vandalize Mr. Brackman's home. Not only this, but Detective Markowitz testified to the fact that Becker's phone followed the ideal path to get from Avery Becker's house to Mackenzie Brackman's house. And finally, Avery Becker had a motive. Multiple witnesses in this case from both the prosecution and the defense have testified to the fact that Avery Becker and Mr. Brackman hated each other. They disliked each other. Avery Becker was so infuriated by Mr. Brackman's words that she even vandalized his car. Members of the jury, I can assure you that Avery Becker did this. So once again, the people of the state of Colorado ask you for justice. We ask you to return a verdict of guilty. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That is the conclusion of the trial. I will make a couple of brief comments to allow the scoring panelists to finish entering their score.